Hello, I'm Richard Burton from the Richard Burton Watercolour channel here on the Yorkshire coast. And today I'm going to ask you a quite straight question. Do you struggle to get water and get sparkle in your water and really make it come to life? Well, this is the channel for you, because today we're going to do a Venice scene where we're looking into the light and we're going to really capture some real sparkle and real action in this scene in a way that's got more mood and atmosphere than I've probably done for quite a while. And it's really simple, some really simple tips, and we're going to do that today. And before we start, we've got this watercolour guide that we've been working on for several months now. And what this is, if you're new to watercolour or you're coming back to watercolour, it's 5 steps into watercolour. It gets you going, it gets you started, and it's some reminders and tips I've been doing based on my pictures that will get you really into watercolour. And it's in the link below, so please feel free, grab yourself a copy. It's all totally free, and hope you find it useful. Right, so let's get back to the painting. Okay, so this is the painting and this is the photograph that we're going to use, a picture of Venice looking over the Grand Canal. It shows the light, but actually we're going to really make more of that light and turn it into a story of mood and atmosphere with sparkling water. So it's going to be an exciting picture to do. Right, so now to the materials. I've got the paper down, taped down, and that's a 300 grams not surface paper that will be strong enough to hold its shape and won't need wetting prior to fixing. I've got a pencil, 2B pencil, I've got a rubber, and then my brushes we're going to use a number 12 wash brush, a number 8 and a number 4. This paint is going to require a bit of masking fluid to protect the light, and we're going to suggest you need an old brush for masking fluid, and it's going to be a liquid masking that we're going to apply early in the preparation. Okay, so let's get down to the drawing, and the first thing we're going to do is establish the horizon line. The horizon line in this case is going to be a little bit over halfway, probably not quite as far as third, but over halfway, so it's going to majority capturing the water. And we're going to start by putting that line in, and then we're going to put the buildings. They're going to be quite diffused and quite distant, but nonetheless need to have quite an accurate silhouette. So I've got a feel for those buildings, which is obviously the chapels, the domes and the big clock tower in the distance. So I'm going to carefully put those in, and then once we're there, we'll then come down and put the boats in, which are the gondolas moored against their stakes. And I'm going to put the 4 gondolas in. Well, effectively it's 2 in the middle, and then there's one at the left hand side which is entering the picture, and then there's one which I think just gives a bit of balance on the right hand side again, which is just entering on the right hand side, leading my eye through the picture to the buildings in the distance. That should nicely complete the drawing. Okay, so now put the gondolas in. I'm going to put the 4 gondolas in, 3 on the left and 1 on the right, which just leading the eye in. Those positioned in that way will hopefully just lead my eye into the picture, through to the buildings and out through the bell tower, which will be just a nice composition. Now for the gondolas, I'm going to start with the left hand one. I'm going to get the bow. It comes to a very strict point, and I'm going to try and get that sweep. Get that sweep of the bow. Once I've got that sweep of the bow, and then put the detail on the gondolas. But the first thing is to just get that sort of general shape, and I'm going to work my way across alongside putting the posts in. There's 1 or 2 posts I think just in the middle. They're just a little bit annoying. I want to have some either side of those posts, not necessarily all of them, so they're just not dominating. Trouble is, big verticals in the middle will tend to split your picture a little bit, and you end up with sort of looking like you've got 2 pictures. So I just need to be careful with that, and work my way across and build in the detail. And then once I've got that done, that concludes the drawing. Right, so let's tackle the sky. Now, the picture, as you can see, has got the light coming in from the right-hand side. We're going to change this. So I want to give a much more energy into the picture, more light, and I want the light to be higher up, looking down, so we're going to get much more sparkle in the water. So with that being the case, we're going to get a nice wash first, and the colour story I'm going to start with is going to be yellow ochre, and then I'm going to mix some blue of cobalt blue and light red. Now the key here is to wet the paper, and I mean wet all the sky, including the buildings. Give them a nice coating of moisture, of wet. Let that soak into the paper. And once that's soaked in the paper, I'm going to drop in some yellow into the centre to keep that feeling of light in the centre, which is coming from above. And then I'm going to drop in the cobalt blue and the light red onto a more moist surface, so the colours will sort of hold their shape but diffuse on the left and the right, keeping that central area nice and bright with the yellow. Okay, so we're going to start with the masking fluid. Get my number 4 brush, or masking brush. I'm going to put this on the water to capture the sparkling water, so we can put the washes on. I'm going to start with some small marks in the distance. That's going to just capture that smaller reflective waves. And then as I come further forward, I'm going to make some bigger marks between the boats, so we can really give that sparkle and magic to the picture. Okay, so we'll let the masking fluid dry, and once we've done that, we're going to use the colours that we've already got for the sky, but we're also going to prep up another one, which is going to be Prussian blue, alizarin crimson and yellow ochre, which will make a darker sea colour. And then we're going to wet the water and the boats, excluding the tarpaulin coloured areas, but other than that, I'm quite happy to wet the boats, give them a good soaking, let that soak in. And then once we've let that soak in, I'm going to start with the yellow ochre wash, drop that into the middle of the painting so that we capture that light coming down, reflecting from the sky. And then alongside that, I'm going to put the cobalt blue and the light red either side. So again, we're mirroring the sky. I'm going to bring that down into the boats and around the boats so that I'm just bringing that tone down the paper. And as I get to sort of midway through the boats, I'm then going to utilise this Prussian blue, alizarin crimson, yellow ochre wash, which is a deeper colour, and bring that through the painting over some of the boats, which I'm quite happy, the hulls of the boats, bring that down. And then as I come to the very bottom, I'm going to reinforce it again with a little bit more cobalt blue. So it's just generally a deeper underwash, and it just gives that little bit more tonal variation through the sea. Okay, so I'm going to let that soak in. Now, while I'm letting that soak in, I'm going to make a stronger mix for the ripples in the water, and this is going to be Prussian blue, light red, alizarin crimson, probably a touch of yellow ochre, and I just want to get that mix of stronger tone, and I'm waiting for the surface to start to move from a wet to a moist, to a damp moist surface, and then we're going to put these ripples in place by carefully dropping the brush and putting the brush marks on the surface. I want the colour to hold its shape but not diffuse away, so it needs to be on that moist or damp surface. And if you can capture that, you'll really get something really magical, because it's an underwash which will just give those feelings of those soft ripples, and it's just a matter of timing. Okay, so we're ready now. That moisture's just about right. I've looked at the surface. I've got a satin sheen, which is a good indicator that the moisture's about spot on. And I'm going to start with a few small little marks, and you can see those colours just sitting on the surface, holding the shape, but just diffusing. And that is about perfect. So I'm happy with that. I'm going to do 1 or 2 more as I come across. Bring those in just to give that feeling of just a soft ripple, softly moving water. I don't want any hard tide marks or hard edges that will move. That means I'm painting onto dry surface. So it's not dry surface, it's just that moist surface, and I'm just giving those little bits of colour change, that diffused colour. And if you capture it, it really is special. I'm also conscious I don't want that underwash to dry too pale, so I'm just going to use some of this. The paper is still damp and moist, and I'm going to weaken this wash a little bit and then paint these marks a little bit further up the paper, particularly on the left and the right of the boats, as we want, just to capture that feeling of light on the water. Once again, I'm looking at the surface. I think it's just drying a little bit lighter than I want, so I'm going to make a stronger mix of the same colours and then just drop a few more marks at the bottom of the paper just to give a little bit more depth. Okay, so now we're looking at the buildings in the distance, which have got that diffused look about them, but they've also got the light coming from above and from the right onto them. And we're going to start with a cool wash, just pale, of cobalt blue from our mix of cobalt blue and light red there. I'm going to bring that in from the right hand side, just gently dropping that in across the piece, trying to really concentrate on the walls. The walls have got that sort of cool look about them, that cool white effect when you're closer up them. And then once we've got that in, I'm then going to utilise some light red and burnt sienna as we move over to a red ochre wash, and then just drop that in. And I'm going to let that soak and dry as a first wash. Okay, so we're going to now revisit the buildings. I'm going to refresh the burnt sienna and light red so I can get those rooftops. I'm going to drop those colours in. Just carefully, as I drop a bit of colour in, I might drop a little bit of water alongside it, so it just gives that help to diffuse it a little bit. Alongside that, I'm also going to drop in the grey, which again is this cobalt blue and light red. And as I drop that in, I'm going to drop it stronger in parts, and then I'm also going to weaken it by adding some water in parts as well. And as I'm going to move from the right-hand side over to the left, as I go across, I'm going to do a little bit of dry brush work just to capture some of the features on one of the buildings, but gradually dropping in the tones as we move from light to red. And I'm going to alternate between lights and darks, so I'm going to pick up that feeling of light and dark and gradually build up a little bit of structure and shape. I've now got the bell tower in. I'm working across to the left hand side, and then as I get to the far left, I'm going to drop in some more blue into that lovely rich red, and then I'm going to work back along the waterfront and put a few darks on the waterfront, and then build in some shadow and some of the features on the buildings. So I've just got a general feeling for what is essentially a red tone, brown tone, and what is a grey at this moment in time. It's going a little bit stark, a little bit plain, but just to get a general feel for those shapes is the key at the moment. Now I'm continually altering between the blue, grey and the red just to build up some shape and texture to the buildings. I'm now conscious that the surface is getting quite moist, so I'm letting that soak in. And as I let it soak in, I'm going to mix some richer colours of both and drop them in. So they're going to go in slightly diffused, but yet have shape to them. And that gives that little bit of feeling of distance and diffusion, which is crucial because the buildings are in the background and I don't want them to come too far forward, but yet at the same time I want to have a little bit of shape to them. I'm now building up a darker colour for the trees behind the buildings. That's going to be Prussian blue and alizarin crimson and probably a little bit of burnt sienna in it as well. Just going to drop that in. That will just give a little, make the buildings in front silhouette against, and it's just that little bit stronger and it will help set them in their place. Now it's still on the damp, and what I'm going to do now is going to drop some further dark into there, put some more detail in parts, put a little bit more shading on the side, and just gradually build up that sense of tone and bring a little bit of detail, not really detail, but just suggestions of detail here and there, so the building's coming a little bit more into focus. I'm now going to gradually build up a little bit more dark, so I can just put a few hints of detail, and I'm going to use ultramarine blue, burnt sienna with a little bit of crimson for that. It'll just make a tiny little richer dark, and I'm just going to drop in here and there, and it will just make the buildings just come that little bit more into focus. Okay, so I'll let that dry, and now I'm going to come back into it and add a little bit more deeper tone with both the tree area and on the buildings and around the buildings. Trees again is that Prussian blue, alizarin crimson with a little bit of burnt sienna, and the buildings are going to be more of an ultramarine blue, burnt sienna with a little bit of crimson. Again, pulled out of that existing grey area that I've got on my palette. All the time as I'm doing that, I'm going to drop a little bit more water here and there, so I get a little bit more diffusion, and so it's not too sharp a darks I'm putting in, so I get that contrast, that feel of a little bit of detail, but also quite a lot of diffusion. And now just building up the colour on the rooftops. I just thought they need a little bit more punch, so I'm using a little bit more burnt sienna and light red. Okay, so now that's dried again, and I'm just going to mix a bit of a purple grey, which is going to be cobalt blue and alizarin crimson, and I'm just going to cascade that around the buildings just to give that extra feeling of shadow, and it will help give that feeling of intensity to the light on the buildings in the distance. Okay, so now we're back to the boats, which will sort of bring a little bit of focus into the foreground. And first of all, I'm going to start with those tarpaulin covers on the boats. I'm going to start with the one probably in the middle, which has got a little bit deeper blue, and I'm using Prussian blue for that. And then I'm going to also throw a little bit of water in here and there just to weaken it. And I'm going to put the others in, the other boats, working from the middle to the left. And as I go across, I'm going to put them in, but they're going to be a little bit weaker as I go towards the left side of the painting. The right boat, just to sort of give a bit more interest, I'm just going to throw a bit of yellow ochre into there and then put some Prussian blue into it just to give it a bit of a colour change. That will just diffuse nicely for that tarpaulin on there. Then I'm also going to use some of this yellow ochre and sort of burnt sienna. I'm going to put that on the side of the boats just to capture some of the lines that will feature later when we put the darks in. And they're just going to sit there for now. And then as we work from there, I'm then going to make a really stronger dark, which is going to be more your ultramarine blue, burnt sienna with a little bit of crimson, and we're going to make it much deeper, and I'm going to put some stronger, deeper darks to the sitting area on the boats. And then my initial stab of colour is going to go in, and then I'm also going to drop in some deeper dark into there and let that diffuse. Okay, so now onto the hulls of the boats, which are going to be the really deeper colour. And first of all, I'm going to put some clear water just on the sides where I think there's going to be a chance of some light catching those. And then I'm going to mix a really strong mix, which is sort of establishing in that palette already, but it's going to be ultramarine blue, burnt sienna and alizarin crimson. Make that nice and rich and strong. And then I'm going to drop that and paint that and push that around for the hulls of the boats and the bow of the boats, which has got a point on it. And just push it round to that diffused area so you get that feeling of just that little bit of light on the side of the boats. And that combination of really strong colour then pushed round to a diffused side really gives some shape to those boats, and hopefully you'll start seeing some shape and structure coming through the painting. Now as I work through these boats, I'm going to put a bit of detail here and there on the sides, on the tops, around the seating areas, and just generally a little bit of interest here and there. And hopefully we'll start to get some really lovely boat shapes. Okay, now once again it's dry, so we'll get to another slight different stage, and what I'm going to do is put the poles in, and the poles want to have a round feel but also looking into the light. So the key to capture that is a bit like putting an underwash, which is going to be of yellow ochre. Just drop that in, let that go in, let that soak in, and then into that I'm going to drop some really strong dark and it will just diffuse and shimmer on the surface, and then you'll get that feeling of roundness to the poles if you can just capture it on that moist, but contain it to those sort of shapes, and it will work really, really well. I'm now going to use a bit of yellow ochre, put some warm tones on the boats, also put a few more darks here and there just to capture a bit of detail, because the boats have sort of dried, so I've got a surface now that we can put some sharper elements onto them. But all in all, we're getting that feel for the shape and the structure of the boats. Now we're into the magic bit where we're going to try and transform this with the water, and we're going to catch those ripples, those more sort of subtle waves in the water that are catching the light. Now these are going to be the shadow colours really, effective for the waves, and I'm using, first one is going to be a cobalt blue and light red, which I'm going to mix, and you've sort of got it on my palette already, but I'm just going to reinforce that. I want to use my number 8 brush when I come to do it, and I'm going to weaken it initially, and then start above the boats and just put some decisive horizontal brush strokes just to capture those initial feeling of those delicate waves that are just going to bring that down the page. And I'm also going to capture not only that, but I'm going to capture the reflections from the posts and the reflections from the boats. And this is just a first initial tone of lighter wave colour that's going to go into the painting. Now we've finished the paler waves, we're going to go for the real drama now. We're going to get that deeper colour, which is going to be your Prussian blue, burnt umber and alizarin crimson mix, and we're going to be decisive with our brush strokes, and we're going to put those waves in, starting on the right of the paper with the waves and the silhouettes coming from the gondola, and then also the posts. I'm going to drop those in, the waves of those, fill my brush up as I come down the page and put some big brush strokes in. And it's going to be onto dry paper, but nonetheless we're going to add plenty of paint and water, so we're going to get that feeling of mixed diffusion, but I want to be stronger as we capture the reflections of the boats particularly, and that really will give some strength and depth to the picture, and you'll see it emerge, you'll see that strength coming into play. All the time I'm dropping it in, but I'm conscious I don't want to lose some of that underwash to come through, because that's important. We're going to take off the masking fluid at the very last, but I still want that sort of rippling underwash to appear as well. So I'm also making a point of putting this dark wave colour on the bottom of the boats, so the boats themselves disappear into the water. You can't see an edge to them because of the strength of the light. It's really capturing that sort of sense of dark there. And if you can capture that in, it's now quite wet, that's lovely. And before I then come to finish, I'm going to look again at the whole balancing of the picture, maybe drop a few more darks on the buildings just to get a bit more shadow here and there. And then that completes that stage. Need to let it dry, and then I'll get my finger and we'll take the masking off, and that's going to be a big reveal. We'll reveal that light, that real sort of sparkle on the water. Now the final thing is just for me to just tidy up some of the masking that might have just encroached onto some of the masts and some of those stakes. I just need to take that off and just reshape anywhere that just needs a little bit of shaping. But other than that, we're quite close to the finished picture. Okay, so there we have it, the finished picture. I've put a mount around it, as you can see, and I'm really quite pleased with it. I think I've got that movement in the water. I've got that sparkle. I wanted to catch it into the sun, so we've got that extra sparkle. And the key was the masking fluid. Just moving that after putting the layered washes on. Look what a difference it makes. It really is quite magical, isn't it? It's really come together in a way that is, hopefully, it's in a way that's straightforward in the sense it steps, and put those steps together, you get a really effective result. So I hope you have a go, and I hope you enjoy it. Now, I've also got to say we've got 6,500 subscribers, which is massive for us. I mean, we're only 11 months old, and that is a big thank you to you all that are found us. And if you have only just found us, don't forget to like and subscribe. That gets us picked up again by a wider audience, but it's massive, and it's great to celebrate watercolour and know that there's so many of you out there that are actually enjoying watercolour and all the elements that come with it. And some more good news, we're just completing our online course, which we've been working on. Well, I've been painting for 30 years and I've been teaching for 20 years. And this is something that we've been working on over the last year. And we're just getting to the finishing stages of it. And we're going to be launching it very soon, just in a matter of weeks. And for the first 50 of you that sign up, you'll get a free material kit, which is all the kit that I use to produce these pictures. And the course itself is going to have basic elements to it, understanding watercolour, and it will understand, I think, hopefully you'll get a feel for how to become a watercolourist and get a real feel for the moisture in the water and all the elements that go with it that make it so special. Now, the course is something that we're going to tell you more of as we get going, as we get closer to the launch day. But in the meantime, all I'm going to say is enjoy and keep painting.